To Salon Talks. I'm Amanda Marcotte, and my guest today is Daniel Kessler. He's the guitarist for Interpol. They have their sixth album coming out, their sixth studio album coming out. It's an album called Marauder, and it's released on August 24th. Welcome to Salon Talks, Daniel.
Thanks for having me.
So there was a lot of overlap between writing this new album and doing a 15th anniversary tour for your debut album, Turn on the Bright Lights. What was it like working on all this new material while also sort of reliving kind of, you know, a 15-year-old album in that way?
Well, when we decided that we were going to do the anniversary tour, basically we decided that like about 7 months before the moment we actually had to begin rehearsals for that. So we were already, by the point of acceptance when we wanted to go do this tour, we had already started writing the songs that ended up in Marauder. In those subsequent months, we kind of kept on writing and so forth, leading right up until the moment where we put those songs away, left them alone, neglected them, and kind of like in a good way for us. But at that point, basically, the songs were like 90% finished. So we kind of put those aside so we could start rehearsing for Bright Lights. What it did, I think, more than actually going out and doing the Bright Lights tour, that was like amazing and so forth. But what I think the huge component for us was just to like leave those songs alone for like 4 or 5 months, or 4 months, and pick them up only and rehearse them for like a week after just kind of thinking about something that you've written like 20 years beforehand. But by the time that we kind of went back to like having that week to see how we felt about the songs, and then a week later, subsequently we were in the studio. It kind of like I don't know, it's a little bit of distance. The songs came running back to us, and by the time it came ready, time to actually start recording, we felt like, no, this is the next chapter of Interpol. This is what we want to capture. So that aside, I think like neglecting like those songs, leaving them alone was actually it was just something new for us to do in a weird way. It was almost aside from actually going about touring for Bright Lights. It was just kind of like it's something new for us in the sense that we've always kind of we tour for like a record, then we disappear for like 3 years, we write and so forth, then we reappear. But it was interrupting that writing process to go do a tour was like something a bit. It sort of kind of informed more of just the preparation of making this record, I suppose.
And that kind of like staggering out your records. I mean, like it's been now 16 years since you've been putting out records, and you've had 6. How do you kind of keep the fan base alive in all that time?
I mean, I think we're just really fortunate we have like these, like really like wonderful like diehard fans, and somehow they've kind of followed us along in our story and so forth, and they kind of, I think they, it's really fortunate that they actually try to discern each record that we release and put out there. I don't know if it's really by effort as much as I think we just, it's just like a really incredible situation, and I think we're really grateful and thankful to have, fans of that nature and of that, that caring sort of enthusiastic and paying attention to detail. But it's not something that I don't think you can really calculate those things or really plan upon them, but I think it's something that you should feel very, should appreciate and feel very privileged to have.
When you guys first debuted, it was during this early 2000s, late 90s New York rock resurgence, particularly of that kind of post-punk sound, and you got compared a lot to bands like Joy Division. How do you feel like your sound has evolved since then?
I don't know. I've always, just like I'm not the greatest at analyzing how our sound has like evolved or I don't know. It's hard for me to put my finger on those sort of things. And in some ways, as a person who's kind of a part of it, I don't know if it's really for me to kind of analyze or put it into a bottle, so to speak. It's I just think we're kind of like on I think we're still evolving. I think we're still moving forward. And I think, also many things in the band has changed a little bit. I mean, we wrote the last 2 records as a trio, and certainly the way we wrote Marauder was kind of, it felt like, we knew from doing the last record as a trio that we could do it, and it felt good how that record came to be. So going into Marauder, it felt like, okay, well, that felt great. So now we know we're going to, go about this process with this sort of confidence and enthusiasm. But at the same time, it still feels like a new process for us because it's I don't know, we're still kind of learning a lot about how we can write music as a trio. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like we're short for ideas. And I think we're still moving forward. I don't know. It's hard for me to say exactly how things have changed, but I do think we're still progressing forward, and we're more experienced now, and I think we're in the moment of actually writing music where we're able to hold that moment a little bit, you know, longer and kind of actually sort of figure out what it is that we're trying to say versus I think maybe when you're first starting out, the moments happen so fast and a little bit harder to control them. But now I don't know, I think experience has served us well, and I think we're getting better and better at it. So, but I don't know exactly how, like, as far as in the context of like what people used to kind of, you know, reference us to other bands and so forth and where we fit in now. I don't know. I think when we're writing music, we just have blinders on and we're just doing our thing and we're just kind of answering to ourselves in that moment and just trying to push ourselves and trying to, you know, move forward as a band and trying to make a better record than we made, you know, previously. That's kind of usually, that's how it really happens for us. So that's the way we think of it in those terms more than the grander context of where we fit in and so forth.
So it's an interesting, I read that your recording process for Marauder was a little bit different than some of your previous records involving the use of tape. Can you tell me some more about this? Because I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, well, we you know, this record we made with the producer Dave Fridman, who's like incredible. He's worked on so many incredible records and with amazing artists for the last 20, 30 years. So, and we'd sent him essentially recordings of just rehearsal recordings, not even demos. And but I think, you know, from that he could see that the songs were moving forward and that they were actually quite complete. They weren't like songs with a lot of holes in them. You know, sometimes you go in the studio, you leave things open, and you can kind of sort of figure out what you're going to write for the bridge there and then. But we're a band that we tend to go to the studio with the songs sort of very much kind of complete for the most part. Maybe there's still some vocal moments that we're still, you know, Paul's still figuring out, or lyrics and so forth. But from hearing these rehearsal recordings, I think he could see that, well, okay, well, here's an opportunity that we could actually use 2-inch tape to record this, like make this record. We've always used 2-inch tape to some capacity in making our records, but usually we only do it for like drums and maybe bass before moving into like Pro Tools and just more expediency and ease. You can have like digital, you can take another take. But by doing 2-inch tape and committing to it for the most part of making a record, it sort of limits you, but you could look at it as limiting you, but it also like limiting your options, but also it actually could be limiting you in a good way where it's like, well, no, it's going to be about, you know, you making a very sort of in the moment kind of record, and you're limiting yourself, so you like, you know, you have to say what you want to say in a 1 or 2 tracks. So, you know, it's like basically you run out of tracks. You're kind of limited. So it'd come down to like if I was doing my guitar parts, you know, like you do the drums and bass, and then you get to usually it's my turn to do guitars. And you know, there was like a moment where I was like, oh, you know, Dave, you know, we did a guitar take on a track, and I was like, oh, that sounded pretty good, Dave. Like maybe let me see if I can. Let's keep that. Let me see if I can do another track and do it a bit better. And he was like, that might be a problem, you know, actually, because then we'd have to erase part of the drums, you know, if we were going to do that. And I was like, no. So essentially what it comes down to, it's like, you know, I would have to make decisions like, well, do I think I can do a better take than what I just did, or do I want to keep that, you know, do I want to keep that take? And it sort of forced you to be less precious about the grand scale of making the perfect record and more about making a very sort of in-the-moment kind of record. And consequently, I think what we came out with is like a band. The record sounds like us playing together, and it has like a liveliness to it and an urgency to it, but it's also kind of minimal. There's not tons of things on that record. It's kind of a minimal sort of just like a honest human kind of record in that sense.
It's like
it's human.
Old-fashioned. No, just kidding.
It's old-fashioned.
You know, before we started going live, we were talking about Brooklyn and New York and how much it's changed in the past few years. And I was thinking about you all's band because you guys kind of came up in a time when it was a lot more affordable to live in New York City for young, struggling musicians. And I wanted to ask you, as somebody who kind of went through that process and things have changed so much, what would you say to young people now who are trying to become musicians and get into rock music and are finding places like New York and San Francisco have really been priced out of what they can afford?
I mean, I think when we were starting out too, it was a different time, like the internet and so forth. It was pre-social media. people did tend to either move to New York or LA if you want, you're in a band, to try to, to give yourself the best opportunity. Or, I mean, that's just usually, it'd be harder to do things in your own sort of like, city and so forth. I feel like nowadays, obviously, with, it's a different era, it's a different world. Like, I don't think you have to move to like a New York or LA. You can be, I don't know, all over the the U.S. doing your thing. And I think with the internet, as long as, so I mean, you have that becomes sort of like the outlet for possibly sharing your music and so forth. But I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to, so I don't think you need to, like, the location, it doesn't really matter so much. The thing that for me back in when we were starting out is I did have this sort of notion that I do think that, like, if you got to do it for yourself first and foremost. You got to do it because you really need to do it. That you really, you really feel like, well, if I don't do this, it'll be kind of miserable in a weird way. It's like something. It's an urgency, and you have to do it for those reasons, not for because you hope people are going to like it and so forth. It's more of like, regardless of how people might, whether it's an audience or so forth, or you being in a band results in you making a record or not. You got to do it because you just like playing music and that pleases you. And there's, things didn't really happen that easy for us in our early days. We were a band for like 5 years before we put out our first record. But what kept us a band is I think we were getting something out of it for ourselves. And it was never we never had any great assurance that we'd actually get to make a record one day. So essentially, I think you just got to do it for yourselves and so forth. And I think being wherever you are, the bonus is, like, I think in this day and age, being wherever you are isn't so important. You have like this outlet that people can hear your music, and I still do believe that if it's good and if it's like your heart's in it and so forth, there isn't it will find its way. Maybe it's a little bit naively, but it'll find its way to an audience to some capacity and so forth, or have a great opportunity to do so by the fact that you can share your music in this day and age and with the internet and so forth within a grander audience.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's just no one way. There's no solution to. There's no like one. There's no secret to it. I don't think ultimately. I think you just got to do it for yourselves and because you need to, and then hopefully they'll things will come together. But it's like if you're doing it for yourselves and you're getting something out of it, that should be the motivating factor.
So let's talk about this record a little bit. There was a lot of drama around the release of the album. You guys hinted at it for a while in the press, and then had a big release announcement in Mexico City. And I thought that was an interesting location. I wanted to ask you, why Mexico City?
I mean, we really, we love Mexico. We love Mexico City. It's, for one, I think we're just, I love going down there personally. It's one of my favorite places to travel to. I think I always, I can learn something new each and every time I go down there on many different scales. As a band, we also have an incredible, incredible audience down there, like really like wonderful fan base, and they just, it's, I don't know, something to really appreciate, and I think we really wanted to kind of go down there and celebrate Mexico. And we've been talking about doing something to like launch an album for, I don't know, like almost like a decade, and it just came to be for Marauder that this was the time. So that was the main idea. It was really just like, let's go down to Mexico, let's celebrate our fan base, and let's celebrate Mexico because we're great admirers of that country and Mexico City because it's like one of the greatest cities in the world. So I think it didn't take that, we don't have to really overthink it beyond enthusiasm first and foremost. And so yeah, we just felt like that was a great place to go down there to reveal our artwork and to announce the record and start things off.
And by the artwork, you mean the cover of this record?
Yeah.
I really was impressed by the cover. It's a very arresting image, but I don't know anything about it. It's a man sitting at a table, and there's mics and it looks like tape recorders around him. Tell me about this image.
Yeah, it's an image. It's photographed by Garry Winogrand, and so to me, he's one of my favorite photographers. And when there was a discussion, about maybe possibly using that image as the cover, I was just enthusiastic from a fan of his or an admirer of his work. I didn't know that it should be possible to license one of his images to be on the cover of an Interpol record. I was really excited about that. And then, like you said, like the image itself is just capturing from just the aesthetic of it. It kind of draws you in. But then the subject matter, it's the Attorney General Elliot Richardson under Nixon, and it's him reading off his resignation letter. And essentially, Nixon had ordered him to fire the special prosecutor who was investigating what would become like Watergate, and he refused to. It was kind of against his principle as far as being the Attorney General and his oath to his office and so forth. And so that's him saying, like, you know, no, and resigning, and subsequently the Assistant Attorney General resigned as well, and then the events unfolded as we now know them as Watergate and so forth. So it's a huge moment, and obviously it's one that kind of mirrors a lot of things that are happening in this day and age. Not necessarily, but it's also in the sense that just because that happened then, who knows where we're heading and so forth. It's a very unpredictable moment by moment. So
it's still an interesting choice to put out an image of somebody facing similar situations and deciding to do the honorable thing.
For sure, it's like a man that's incredibly principled and just taking a stance and not bowing to, you know, an order of, you know, the President of the United States, and be like, no, that's like, you know, my oath is to the office and not to you and to what's right. And then him basically, he could have towed the line and just been like, okay, you know, I'll just. But no, it's him taking a moment, and it's obviously now looking back in hindsight, you know, it's an incredibly important moment in American history.
So you guys have 2 singles out on this record. The second single off the album is called Number 10, and I was reading your Twitter account, and it said, and somebody described it on your Twitter account as an office drama. The narrator is tired of his supervisor, Ella, breathing down his neck. She's a tough boss, but there's also love there, a secret attraction. A mutual secret attraction. And I was like, first of all, that's a cool little story there. But also, I have to ask how you feel about putting a song like that out, like now that like Me Too's kind of like become a thing. And like the politics of like sex at work are an issue now.
Well, okay, well, that's an interesting one.
Not to throw a big curveball at you.
I don't know. That's I don't know. I mean, it's obviously a very sensitive age and so forth in many capacities, and I'm very happy for that, because I think it's time that we all sort of have this bigger conversation and really try to. And if we're going to try to change the way things have been for way too long, then it's gonna take a moment. It's gonna take a great upheaval in general. So. That's that. As far as like within this tale, I mean, it's hard for me to actually answer because I don't write lyrics and so forth, and I don't know if I feel comfortable.
That's fair.
You know, taking that standpoint of explaining this, or you know, kind of giving a rationale, because I might not do a good job. I might not do a faithful job, and I think it's too important of a discussion to have to not represent it from that capacity.
That's fair. That's fair. I didn't mean to throw you a big curveball.
No, that's a good question.
So I guess we'll just wrap this up by asking, you know, for the fans out there that are watching this, what is coming up for you guys in terms of touring this album, in terms of releasing it, what other things they can look forward to?
Well, we're really excited to be, you know, this record is something that really, it was a great experience making it. It's something that was just a really good moment for the band, in the sense our communication was great, and it's just also just the actual process of going up to the studio in Western New York, working with someone like Dave Fridman, who's just an incredible producer, and being very open to his ideas and his input. And you know, we're a band that can also, I'm going to take a little liberty here. We're a band that can also, like, it's just, you know, we can be very sort of, we've produced a lot of our records, and we can kind of just do things ourselves, but we're very vigilant about going there and making sure to leave the space for him to do his thing, and to remember, like, well, you went up there to invite this person to be a part of your process, so let's have his contribution, because we're quite certain it's going to make for a better result. And it really did, and it just, so I think we left that experience just feeling really enthusiastic by what, you know, the work we put into it, and I think Dave felt the same way, and so really, really proud of the album, and it's something that we can't really wait to share with our audience, and we really do think it's, I mean, at least I really think it's as good as anything we've done to date, so I'm excited to go out there and play it live when we go start. You know, we're going to start touring in a few weeks. Well, actually, we're going to Mexico on Monday, so a few weeks being 4 days from now. And that's, you know, we're going to start there, and then subsequently we're going to do we have a show in Philadelphia and in New York, actually, like in the next 10 days or so, well, a little more than that, 2 weeks. And then, yeah, once the album comes out in early September, we'll be touring through the States and Europe and Japan and Hong Kong and Singapore, and then onwards and upwards. But it's like, yeah, we're really, you know, now we have 6 records, which is a lot. So when we go play live, it becomes, you know, it's becoming more difficult to figure out like how do we represent each record, and then with also having a lot of enthusiasm playing a lot of the songs from Marauder live. So I think it's going to be a really fun tour. It's going to be quite a busy, you know, year plus, but I think it's great having all these these records together and just trying to see how these songs work together in an actual set live, and seeing the similarities through the arc of our, you know, our trajectory as or discography at this point. So yeah, good times.
Thank you so much, Daniel. My guest today has been Daniel Kessler. The album is called Marauder by Interpol, and it's out on August 24th.